Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm an e-learning evangelist here at eLearning Brothers. Today our webinar will be about the e-learning ecosystem, and it will be recorded. We'll also send a copy out to all of the viewers so that you'll have a copy of your own afterwards. Today we have our own Bill West, the Executive Director of Custom Services with eLearning Brothers Custom, Mike Ruska of Problem Solutions, and Dr. Michael Allen of Allen Interactions with us today. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. If you guys have questions during the webinar, if anybody has questions during the webinar, please use that questions panel. We will be using that questions panel to address as many of the questions as we can, and anything that we can't get to, we will try to continue this conversation in a webinar recap that we will post next week on elearningbrothers.com. Also, just so you know, one of the things that we like to do after the webinar is try to follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time we want to touch base and find out if anybody has some one-on-one needs about our webinar topics after the fact, things like that. So do be expecting that. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to be here. Nice to be with two of my great friends, Dr. Michael Allen and Mike Ruska. Look forward to this opportunity. Do a brief introduction. My name is Bill West. I've been in the industry for quite some time, dating back to the 80s, and intimately involved over the last 15 years, which is a lot of what we'll talk about today, and how the industry has changed since then. With my good friend, Michael Allen, who many of you might know, but Michael, maybe say a couple words as an intro.
Hey, everybody. A couple words. Really always delighted to talk to people who are serious about using technology to help other people.
Outstanding, outstanding. I'm also pleased to be here with Mike Ruska, who some of you may not know as well as Michael Allen, but I'll tell you honestly, without this guy, our e-learning industry may never have existed. Hey, Michael?
Thanks. I'll also say a couple of words, but I'm really excited to be here. I love this concept of learning ecosystems. Technology can solve a lot of problems that we're facing, but really thinking thoughtfully about business outcomes and design is super important, and I think we're probably going to talk about that.
Yeah. So it is exciting. Most of you know that Michael Allen, dating way back to the 70s, created the market that we're in with many of the early tools, and then continued to teach us along the way. And Mike Ruska, whose team created the SCORM protocol, and most recently the Experience API, XAPI protocol. I've got two gentlemen here who cover the two ends of the spectrum of everything we're dealing with. So it's going to be a lot of fun to moderate the conversation between the two of them. Before we get into that, I'm going to ask Andrew to help us learn a little bit about our audience, because I definitely want to make sure that we're catering this conversation to your specific needs. So Andrew, we got a couple questions for the audience.
Yep, the first question, tell us about you. We'll go ahead and put it up here, and let us know. Let us know who you are, if you're a senior manager, a curriculum manager, design developer, or a vendor. Looks like we're getting some good responses here. About 67% of you have voted. We'll just give you a few more seconds to respond here in our early poll. 3, 2, last chance. And here's those results. So it looks like about 71% of our audience are designer developers. We've got 15% that are senior managers over learning operations. And then we've got a few people that are curriculum managers and vendors also here in our audience.
Outstanding. We'll definitely make sure we tailor this to the practitioners and those of you that live in this environment day in and day out, trying to actually create those solutions. I think we have a second question there, Andrew.
Yep, our second question is, what are you interested in? You looking for a vision in using modern technology? You have the funding, but you're not sure where to start? You want to know the potential to make your case to those above you, and needing to find vendors you can trust to guide you in this current ecosystem. So those responses are coming in. We're only at 60%, so last chance here. Give you a few more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Looks like 73%, the majority of our audience, are looking for vision for using modern technology.
Outstanding. Well, there's nothing more I think the three of us enjoy talking about than vision and what the potential is with everything that's come upon us for the next 15 years. So this is an audience I think, guys, we're going to enjoy being around. Andrew, please. We have another question.
Yep. Our third question is, how do you feel about where you're at right now? How do you feel about the situation of e-learning now? There's a question, do you love this millennium and all the toys it brings, or you love that millennials gave us the excuse we needed to continue to work in technology and move e-learning there? Lots of enthusiasm, but many unanswered questions. Jobs were hard enough, and all this technology growth is making it harder. So we'll give you a few more seconds here. All right, 3, 2, 1, and here's those results. A lot of people that have a lot of enthusiasm, but not a lot of answered questions, and a lot of people that just love all the toys that they get to play with here in e-learning.
Excellent. I won't read too much into the fact that you guys tend to love the millennium better than you love the millennials. I, for one, have a soft spot for millennials because if it wasn't for them and their loud voices, we may not be able to do some of the things that we're doing right now.
And,
excellent.
6% of our audience is really honest.
Well, by 2020, 1 in 3 Americans will be millennials. By 2025, it'll be over half of our workforce.
Better pay attention to them. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe. Depends on what you want to do.
Outstanding. And one of the things I wanted to point out that I had noted is that there is a question panel as part of your controls. So please do submit questions throughout the dialogue. I'll be monitoring the questions and be able to toss in a couple to Mike along the way. So definitely appreciate all your participation. Excellent. Okay, good. Good. Well, let's move forward then, if we can. So just a brief introduction to why we're here. In the past, our whole world was relatively easy. At the dawn of the 2000s or so, and dating back into the early 1980s and 90s of things like authorware, our world was basically consisted of creating online courses, most of which ran on the web. We had some authoring tools. Sophisticated authors could use HTML and XML, and of course our beloved Flash, who I will miss dearly over the years, was a reliable tool for us. And because of SCORM, we had ourselves an environment where we could create courses, and we had LMS systems, and they fundamentally kind of worked together. And then on the other side, the LMSs helped us schedule classes. We had instructor-led training, so we had flip charts and markers. Our world wasn't very complicated. We put content on LMS, and we could get to it in different ways. Over the course of the last 15 years, some really exciting things happened around us. Social networking tools came about with the Facebooks and Twitters and such. Smartphones came about, and mobile computing not only had the power, but the actual real estate on the screen. Our personal abilities within mentorship programs and other types of apprenticeship programs. And then the technologies really exploded, and I'm going to look forward to talking about those today and such. So a lot of really exciting things happened around us that we either could or were trying to figure out how to implement in our learning solutions. We grappled with this about a year ago, thinking, how do we take all of these things that have occurred and find a relationship between them? How do we map the ecosystem so that we could first identify everything that was possible, but then talk about how these things work so that we may in some ways be able to envision what a solution might look like. And we came up with something like this. So we crowdsourced this, reached out to a whole lot of our colleagues and thought leaders and friends to figure out what are all the modalities and the important pieces of the puzzle, and then how do they move and how they work together. And this is what we came up with. So Michael and Mike, some initial thoughts on what we've been calling our ecosystem?
Well, I certainly agree with the people that feel like this is an exciting time, and we have more tools than ever before to use. So, you know, that's a real plus. But you know, even back when it was relatively easy, as we put it, instructional design has always been a challenge, and you know, I've been working for a long time trying to simplify the rules, but not make it simpler, as Einstein said, because to harness this technology wisely means you really have to center everything on the learner's experience and tune everything so that that experience recognizes who they are as an individual, what they need, and gives them that kind of support. And you know, the support today ranges anywhere from just reminding you what the steps are on your phone to putting you into a multiplayer simulation where a lot of dynamics are changing, and your response time is almost as important as what your response is. So the challenges haven't decreased with all of the technology. We've just opened the door to more options, and I think that puts more onus on us to not go crazy like in a candy store and get sick, but to map out a program that uses these technologies effectively. And I think it's a big challenge, but when done well, we can exceed far beyond things we could do even just 5 years ago.
Outstanding. Mike, some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So from 15 to 20 years ago, we were shopping in the general store and only had so many supplies. In today's world, we have so many different choices for functional types of technology, and also the types of vendors that are available within that. It's basically you can use anything to do anything, which means you can do everything, which is almost on the way to doing nothing because it's so complex. And that's the good thing. And instructional design is super important. And I think another concept that's really important to think about, and Michael touched on this, is really thinking about the experience and mapping the experiences and the journeys, and that's something where some human-centered design and design thinking, and for those of you that haven't heard of design thinking set of tools and methodologies that enables you to unpack complexity and frame problems and articulate potential solutions and access the way to future-proof your world. Also, I think another thing that's really relevant is lean thinking. So what's the least amount of stuff that you can do upfront initially to prove your thesis, get a pilot, demonstrate some business value with some of these things in the learning ecosystem, and be able to move ahead. Because all of these things that fulfill the learning ecosystem are standalone technologies, data becomes really important. People-driven or data-driven people decisions are really critical. You could spend a lot of time trying to integrate these systems, and we've done a lot of work to bring the Experience API into the world. Not that you need it to make all these systems work together, but there are technology choices out there that will lower your total cost of ownership to achieve a high point of functional utility within a learning ecosystem. I could say a lot more, but I'll stop there.
Outstanding, outstanding. Today we have a number of cases and examples that we're going to show. Before we get into it, I want to hone in on just a couple sectors of the ecosystem and get your perspective on what's going on in these areas. One of the areas, and I don't know that you can actually see my cursor, but in the lower right-hand portion of the ecosystem, between strategy and technology, we have things such as XAPI, the learner record store, the analytics, and we talk about data. This is an exciting area of the ability to create solutions where we can capture so much about what's going on. Like I think you referred to it as the exhaust of the experience. And actually study those analytics and tie those analytics back to our initial intent, whether it was the competencies and such. That's a new area that I find really exciting, and I'd be interested in your perspective both your perspectives on the evolution in those areas. Michael?
Well, actually, this is back to the future, I guess, or moving forward to the past. I don't know how you say it. You know, when people started using computers in education, like Seymour Papert at MIT or Patrick Suppies at Stanford in the very early days in the 60s and 70s, when this whole thing was started and we were looking at this, the primary interest was how can we use the information we gather from each learner's actions to tailor that experience to them. And so it wasn't about the presentation of content very much. In fact, you know, computers at that time weren't very good for presentation of content. We certainly didn't have any animation or video. We only had color. In fact, the ones that I started with only had text. In fact, we only had uppercase text. Yeah.
And it was orange.
Right? And yet, from that early work that people did, we had just spectacular learning outcomes because each thing that happened was dependent on all the things that happened before. And not only all the things that happened before for this learner, but things that happened before for lots of learners. You know, so we were evaluating the general effectiveness of the particular challenges we put to learners, the specific effectiveness of feedback that we gave, the sequence that everything went through, and so forth. So in many ways, we're coming back to that intelligence, which is really the thing, I think, that gives this power. It's sort of unfortunate that, sounds silly, but it's sort of unfortunate that our computers have all this capability and they're so cheap. Because if that weren't the case, we'd put a lot more time and effort in making sure that this expensive stuff was used extremely effectively. But now you can pop up everything that looks as beautiful as a full color, high resolution magazine on the screen, and it looks really pretty. But giving people content, just presenting the content, is not what this is about at all, you know. And I think we have a lot of confusion in this field. But things, you know, its pendulum kind of goes back and forth, and now I think we're coming back to what's really interesting about e-learning is how do we maximize the effectiveness of each learner's time. I just think that's a real responsibility because no learner gets a refund on their time, and if they find out that, boy, this was boring, this didn't help me, it isn't what I needed, I still don't get what I was supposed to be learning, and so on, they don't get their time back for that. It's spent, right? And so when we have this technology that can reach thousands and thousands and thousands of learners as they do, like we're going to talk a little bit about some work that we did with Mary Kay, and in a very short amount of time we had 3 million people spending their time using this software. And if it had been a waste of their time, just think what a human waste that is. We could be doing so many things with that time. So if you are a teacher and you're mentoring someone and you couldn't see them and you couldn't hear them, how good a job could you do, right? You'd be watching everything they did, and you would be looking for all the clues that tell you what you should say next, how you should help them in the best way. And we have fewer sources right now of information from our systems, but in general, so many people aren't using any of that data. Now with the work that many are doing and problem solutions, and they're just amazing engineers and technologists over there, can answer all our questions. So now it comes back to us again from design is, what are the questions? We've got to make sure we ask the right questions so that the answers can make our learning experiences more effective.
Outstanding, outstanding. And one of the things I promise is there's actually an exercise that Mike and his team has really perfected to help figure out what those initial questions ought to be.
That's right.
To answer those. The first acronym we'll tackle is XAPI, and we had a couple questions of people helping define what these acronyms are. So Mike, you guys introduced XAPI to the rest of the world, so maybe talk a little bit about what that really means.
Sure. About 10 years ago, we went to the government at the Advanced Distributed Learning Program. One of my other founders here, Jonathan Poltrak, who just provided me with some great news. The Department of Defense instruction that required SCORM the new one has been signed by the Secretary of Defense, now requiring SCORM or XAPI or both, which means we're going to continue to see a ton of investments there. But we went to them with the idea for capturing this data exhaust in the world. People learn in a variety of places, not just inside of an LMS. How can we capture that data and unlock meaning in that data that helps to enable the GPS metaphor, where learning knows where we're at and where we're going and gets us there the best way possible? Well, the way GPS works is a lot of sensors and satellites and maps and latitude and longitude. So all of those things have some parallels that are inside of learning. So the question for us and for everyone here is, how do we take these things and really understand them in our ecosystem and get valuable data out of them? So that's what XAPI does. It provides a format to say who did what when, in what context, and what were the results. Easiest way to think about it, it's like printing a receipt from everywhere and throwing them into a big shoebox called the Learning Record Store, but having a good digital shoebox that enables you to get insight out of that. Things that can adapt people's learning paths, things that can help you understand business metrics and outcomes. At the end of the day, every organization is interested in having a competitive advantage in their marketplace, and data-driven people decisions are a way to do that. So if we can provide multiple modalities of learning experiences for people that are thoughtfully designed, where we're tracking knowledge and skill acquisition, where we're tracking that those things are turning into behaviors, and we can understand how those behaviors are affecting KPIs and business processes, then we can see a picture of how learning is having a positive effect on individual and organizational performance.
Outstanding. Outstanding. One of the areas that it impacts in the middle, a lot of people are talking about, one of the popular subjects is the idea of adaptive learning. And so you see in the ecosystem the idea of the data coming off via XAPI, tying it to assessments, and then other things such as LCMS, which is where the content could be stored, content management system, and then strategically placed in the middle this thing called artificial intelligence, which is emerging. All of these things working together to help deliver to an individual the kind of information and opportunities that they need when they need it, and making sure that what's being delivered is more tailored towards specifically them versus everybody else. So I'm interested in your perspective, both of you, about the emergence of adaptive learning and even the potential that artificial intelligence might add to it. Michael?
Well, I almost answered this already, and in that the work that the early people were doing could be viewed as sort of a rudimentary artificial intelligence, where it was looking at all the data that were available and determining what next to do. But e-learning is mainstream now, and so it's moved from the laboratory and research into practical use. And unfortunately, most organizations look at training as a cost rather than as a competitive investment. I hope we're all working on changing that outlook so that we have more to work with. But we do see organizations now realizing that, as you put up on my slide, success always comes from people doing the right thing at the right time. Doesn't come from people knowing what to do and doing the wrong thing. It comes from them actually doing the right thing at the right time. And artificial intelligence gives us a way to allow people to practice. Well, when it's time to perform, it's too late to practice. So it's really great to practice in a safe environment where it doesn't cost customer relationship or explode a product or whatever it might be. But that practice needs to be authentic. It needs to have all the complexities that the real world has in it that can detract from successful performance. And with the AI engines that we have now, we can improve the authenticity of those events so much. So we can now use natural language, and people can respond verbally. We can see hand movements. We have virtual reality coming along where we can walk around and we can touch things and so forth. All of those things allow us to make the context of learning so real that if you can perform the task well and efficiently in the training program, the transfer to the real world is just almost a no-brainer. It happens automatically. But AI as a technology, really needs to be encapsulated in a way that people can access it. And so, I've worked for a long time in authoring systems, and what I find now is that there are so many people that are developing training programs that really don't have a lot of technology background. And so we need to bring all of this almost as a commodity, a set of tools that you can just plug and play. And in the work that we're doing now, we develop custom training, but what we're doing so much more of now is just creating the framework that fits an organization's need, and we externalize the major logic and the content in things like Google Docs, so that people who can concentrate on the learning experience and how the context is used to create challenges for learners can just be written up in external documents, and then you can try it on a set of learners and see how it works, removing a lot of that programming requirement that really is a profession in and of itself, and most people can't do. So we're kind of turning the AI not only on our learners, but we're turning it now on ourselves to help create these learning experiences much more easily.
Michael brought up something, and it's consistent with one of the questions we have. How does somebody do an XAPI? You are a practitioner. All these things make sense to you. How do you bridge from what I'm doing today to being able to use data? And how do I work with IT to figure out how to do that as well? Does an LMS do that, or does it take more?
That's a great question. I hear that question often. The good thing is many of the existing vendors in the marketplace realize that XAPI is going to be bigger than SCORM was. The SCORM solved a specific problem. And first, they need to be able to produce XAPI data. I'll make sure that we share this. There are some good lists out there that are available about XAPI product adopters. So it's helpful to find products, whether those are products that you're developing e-learning with that can encode XAPI as part of the learning package, so that you can at least get some information about completion and maybe other data about that. I think that's really helpful. But there are also other types of tools that are front-end web experiences or portals or other types of technologies that allow XAPI data to be created really in the background. And I think that that's really interesting. The third level of tools are tools that are able to consume XAPI data and do something meaningful, maybe recommend a learning path, or maybe adapt or personalize some of the learning excuse me, that's available to you. At the same time, though, there are a ton of open source examples that we've developed at the ADL program, and others that are out there available on GitHub. If you have some motivated developers, you can XAPIize most anything inside of your organization. Problem Solutions is working with Zebra, who makes the printers and scanners right now, to develop a technology that enables their IoT devices to output XAPI data about people working in factories and manufacturing, warehousing, and logistics operations. So, I mean, we're all part of the Internet of Things because of this that everyone has with them. or else we wouldn't know where we're supposed to be, or when we were supposed to be there, we'd be home getting our phone. So mobile creating XAPI data is also another interesting thing because of the amount of context that you can capture. So there are vendors that are making stuff that produce it. There will be more vendors that make things that consume it in the future, but there are enough tools and examples available that with some motivated internal staff that you can develop it. Or we're glad to help out too. I mean, a lot of the work that we're doing is helping people understand what's the vision for your learning ecosystem, and then how do you adapt those systems that may not be XAPI ready to start producing data, and then how do you start to understand and make a sense-making map for the picture of that data.
Outstanding. Now, we could talk about this all day long, and we'll be talking about it all year long. We have a monthly webinar just like this. We'll be dissecting this, and we're giving presentations at DevLearn and other places to continue to explore this area. We'll also send this out with a white paper for anybody who wants it to learn more. But one of the things I did promise you today is that we would look at examples and talk about cases and be able to see some of these things in practice. The first thing I want to show is more of a localized example of pulling together many of the things in the middle of the ecosystem together to create learning solutions that are tremendously exciting and a lot more interesting than what we've had in the past, but also things that aren't that hard anymore. A lot of things that you would see in a demo of this nature, such as the use of animation or video, the use of gamification, a number of things that really combine a blended learning experience, are techniques that were always very complicated in the past. But as the technologies evolved and the ecosystems evolved, things of this nature just aren't as difficult as before. The design is still difficult, and Michael, you might chime in here, is I can make this as cute as I want, but if it's not addressing the heart of the problem, then it's not much more than just a way to pass the time. Would you tend to agree with that one?
No, I tend to agree with that. As I mentioned, people did great things with uppercase text, so you can the temptation lies there to do all kinds of cute things that really don't make a difference, and that just runs up the cost. So what we have to do, I just got these little axioms, but that because of my age, your memory starts to go. It really helps to have mnemonics and acronyms. But we're going for meaningful, memorable, motivational experiences. And all three M's are critical in order to get to any kind of the fourth M, which is a measurable impact. And when we say that it has to be memorable, we don't mean that I remember taking the course and it had cute animations in it, or it was fun, but I really didn't get anything out of it, right? So I really believe in game formats can be tremendous learning situations, but you have to be very careful. Because what people can come away with is this memory that I played a game and it had these fun little things and this happened. But the content that you're trying to teach, gets it ends up in the background and it's forgotten. So we'd rather you forgot the game, but you really built some skills. So all of this technology is powerful and useful, but it is also potentially distracting and wasteful. So it can be great or it can be bad. Just because you're using advanced technology doesn't make it good. And that's why I just keep harping over and over and over again that you have to find the components of a learning experience that give you those three M's, which, I don't get to go launch into a structural design primer here, but, you got to get your context right. You have to challenge people at an appropriate level. You have to give them activities to perform that are analogous to real-life decisions and actions that they will need to take to be successful. And then, of course, you have to give them guidance through consequences and feedback so they can see where they're going to go. And if you stay focused on those, on the context, the challenge, activity, and the feedback, then you can use all of this great stuff to make each one of those components powerful, and you win. You know, so in a way, I think it's simple as long as you have the discipline to stay focused.
Outstanding, outstanding. And one of the things we certainly know and learned over the years is that the idea of sitting in front of a course for an hour or 2 hours, digesting it, and then going out and doing your own 70-20-10 rule of having to learn everything else on the job isn't great. And the idea of a blended solution, which 17 years ago was the idea of taking an online course, then going to a classroom, and then maybe having an online resource later, is kind of constrained. Now, the lovely thing about the ecosystem and the things motivating us to use the ecosystem is the idea of having lots of resources that you can either pushed out to you or that you can grab as needed, that are delivered over time as you need those, and where the data is being stored along the way. So it knows what you've done, it knows what you need, it knows where you are. And the idea of coming up with really amazing, pervasive solutions using a blended solution like this would be for a sales training campaign, for example, that is now possible as a result of the ecosystem. Mike, we continue to get questions about what is an XAPI, and how would it fit in this environment if I was this individual going through my life as a salesperson? How would XAPI improve this overall campaign?
Yeah, I mean, so let me give you a couple of practical examples. I mean, this person, maybe even before they're onboarding, might take some type of self-assessment, might be able to glean some data about their level of proficiency in certain areas for certain competencies using a set of measures. They then could attend some formal training activity that could be in an LMS. That LMS could report out what competencies that they might have attained. That would be some XAPI data. They might now go out on a sales ride, and Bill rides along with them. And Bill has a mobile application that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit that has a set of measures for those same competencies and maybe some other competencies. And Bill's making observational assessments about that person. Maybe for 2 or 3 things, they're determined to be below the threshold for proficiency. System's listening in the background and says, well, I'm going to give them these 2 or 3 micro-learning activities because the next time I ride with them 3 days from now, I'd like to see if they actually improve on these deficiencies. At the same time, Dr. Allen sitting in the background with his master dashboard of capabilities and competencies, and he can see not just the path for the salesperson individually, but can see the aggregate competencies of people and look at things like performance over time. Bill's salespeople that he's out there riding with, he sees that each of the activities they're doing are scaffolding up on their ability to listen to customers and whiteboard problem spaces and other types of things that are important. And then when Dr. Allen and I are looking at all this data, we can start to see what content is actually having a positive effect on learning. And we can figure out where to prioritize our investments in the curriculum so that Bill's getting a better group working for him in sales, and Susie, the salesperson, is getting a better experience and feeling like the things around her are supporting her in the learning ecosystem.
Outstanding. We got an example. Michael, you mentioned earlier the work that you did with Mary Kay. And if I could launch this, but talk about how some of these principles were applied in this program that you mentioned, that millions of people taking this program.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to even though a project might be called the training project, the first thing is to understand what would be the best possible outcome. What are you really trying to achieve? So many of us, I'm sure a lot of the people attending are very familiar with somebody coming in saying, all our people need to know this stuff. And And you know, I feel like it's time to ask like a toddler, maybe a 3-year-old or 4-year-old who asks why all the time. But that's what I want to do. I ask why. Why do you want them to know all this stuff? You know, and it's constraining if the objective is just for people to know stuff. What we really want to do is help people be successful. We want the organization to be successful, and that's a bigger scope, but a much more interesting and a much more valuable challenge to undertake if you can be successful. And so Mary Kay has a long and inspiring history of this woman starting her business basically from nothing, and being very interested in helping women start their own businesses. So this was never all about her. It was about her wanting to help people start their own business so they could augment their own income or get out of whatever job they might have gotten stuck in and do something that they're passionate about and that they really care about. So here was an opportunity to really look at what new beauty consultants needed for support and who are they. So first question, who are you training to do what? You know, it's not about what do you want people to know. Who are you training to do what? And we find out that the people that they needed to train to start and run their own business were very different kinds of people. Some of these people were all about cosmetics and fashion. Others just looking for some source of income. You know, some people had business backgrounds. Some of them had no business background. Some of them were very confident about their ability to sell. Others were terrified of the notion that I have to sell stuff. Oh God, I don't think so. You know, but I still want to do this because I love this industry. So we saw that their trainers were very, very different. I mean, their trainees. They wouldn't call them trainees. Their consultants were very, very, very different. So we realized that, first of all, as we've been talking about, the instruction needs to be sensitive to who it is I'm talking to at the time. So it starts out by building your story, I-story. Who am I? You know, what did you do before starting your Mary Kay experiences, as you're showing on the screen now? And it goes through a series of questions where we start to build a profile of this learner. And until we know something about who you are, we can't do the best thing for you. We can waste a lot of your time, but we can't use your time very effectively if we just throw out the same thing to everybody. So these survey questions then lead to you're needing to set up a business plan. And if you know how to go do a business plan, you can go right to it. But if not, we can help you through it. So you're going to do this basically once and then modify it over your time. So we don't need to make you an expert in business planning. We just need to help you do this task, right? So here it's basically a performance support sort of thing, and we walk you through that and setting up your business. And you know, it varies. I'm going to put full time on this. I've got 2 evenings a week I can do it. You know, very different business plans. I have a nest egg that I can use to help fund this, and I can build up a lot of product right away, or I don't really have much money, and so I'm just really going to focus on one subset of the product line at first and build this up. One of the most exciting things to me, well, there are 2 really exciting things. One is you saw those album covers at the beginning. Each one of those is a different set of micro-learning modules. And as we learn more about you, we start adding or taking away some of those different modules. We don't want you to waste your time on stuff you clearly don't know. We don't want you to waste your time on stuff that you're clearly not ready to tackle. You know, so try to make it simple, and yet, of course, you can access anything you want. It's just that we put right in front of you those things that we think are going to be most helpful to you based on what you know. And there's so much more to say about this, but one of the things that just thrills me to death is that as you start to create your story, we can look in the database and find other people who have a similar story, you know, that maybe they also only have Tuesday and Thursday nights and don't have very much money, but have sales experience, for example, like you do. You know, well, we can put you in touch with those people who have started just like from the same place that you did and have built a very, very successful business. So who better to ask questions of, to be in contact with, than a group of people who are coming at this from the same place as you are and were successful. And so this helps Mary Kay help other people get their businesses started. Obviously, it helps Mary Kay as the successful organization it is. But they're successful primarily, in our view, because they focus primarily on helping each one of their learners be successful. So we were really aligned when we came into this, and we used a bunch of technology. So, you know, all of this is goes on your phone or your laptop or whatever device that you're using. It has performance aids. It helps you. Many of them, by the way, are really frightened to death about sales. And so there's experiences in there about how to overcome objections, how not to get rattled, you know, and how not to go blank, saying, well, what do I say now? Said, not interested. You know, what do I say now? You get to do that role playing and have those experiences before you encounter a real situation. And if you've practiced enough online, then you're ready to handle that in the real world. So a real success story using quite a number of the components of the ecosystem.
Outstanding. It's certainly one of my favorite examples that your team has put together, pulling so many things from the ecosystem together for a learning journey. Now, some of the people who need the learning and reinforcement and information need it when they're actually doing their job in the midst of everything. And the idea of it being more like a GPS, and that the learning environment knows where you are, it knows what you're trying to do. It's tracking what you've done in the past and what you're doing now, and providing the things that you need in order to do those tasks is immensely exciting. And Mike, you guys have done a few things recently that is actually putting those types of ideas to work. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about this example.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the stakeholders here, in this case, all use the same 12,000, roughly, camera technicians and other types of folks to produce their worldwide sports productions. They realized they had a vested interest in training them and making sure they were safe, and the stakeholders here are really the health and environmental safety folks from each of these organizations. They saw value in providing common learning and work together to build out some courses, and had those stood up with Moodle, and were distributing those courses to their technicians. We started working with them last year on the idea that we need to meet people where they're at, and that if we could use the phone, there are a lot of other types of functionality that we could unlock. So we developed a really future concept for them, and what we're around using the mobile phone, not just as a learning guide for you, but a tool for safety and compliance as well. So their mobile application launching here very shortly. We'll be able to, all the technicians will be able to access their courses while they're on airplanes and other types of places. Most importantly, we're using features like geolocation and geofencing that allow us to know you're at this stadium in Pittsburgh, and these are the relevant procedures that you need for that stadium while you're in Pittsburgh, and other safety and venue information. Just by using the location on the phone, people don't have to search, and you're really just one touch away. We're integrating other types of data sources too, though, to mitigate some of the hazards related to weather, and also looking at how to do secure messaging and things without cell phones. At the end of the day, we really took an infrastructure that was web and Moodle and moved it into the phone, enable people to do some pretty awesome things offline, but be able to do location-specific things that help enhance the safety and their job.
Outstanding, outstanding. One of the things that's extremely popular with the advent of the technology is more observational data. So it's one thing to be able to take a course, it's another thing to be able to push information, but not all that can simply be tracked by things I'm doing online, but more coaching, things that my manager might see, the regular performance review process that I might go through. And the technology now with XAPI and a lot of other things are allowing us to finally integrate that aspect into our learning record and our experiences. Very interested in both your perspectives in terms of starting to include this type of information into the overall profile of an individual. Michael, perhaps you first?
Well, right. I think we're going to see the whole framework of education change, following along perhaps with training. But getting all of your training from one place has never been the reality of how people learn and perform. And so experience many times is more valuable than a degree. And people need to get credit for that, but also the learning systems need to understand that that's in place, so I know how to help you advance from where you are. Thank goodness for XAPI, because to me, SCORM has been just terribly limiting, and we've done a lot of work to get around it, actually. so now I think we're getting where we really need to be, which is we look at the whole world. Parts of it are structured, parts of it are unstructured, and we need to pull back that information to know who you are, but also for you as an individual to know who you are. Sometimes, you forget about skills that you've got and experiences that you've had, and if you could pull all that information together, you can plan your future much more effectively yourself, just as instructional systems can be of much more help to you. These new technologies allow your offline experiences, your online experiences, your training, your education, all of that to come together where it's really useful to you as a learner, just as we see happening in the medical system now, where all of your lab data and your various treatments and procedures you've been through, if any, and all of those things come together to help your doctor help you much more effectively, and for you to protect yourself. So very similar.
Okay. Now, Mike, this example here, Metricity, is actually an application you and your team built. What's your perspective on this angle?
Yeah, while we can get a lot of data from systems kind of passively or in the background, us as people are the best assessment instruments. Our expert eye can tell a lot. So we wanted to be able to capture that. Took some military technology and some research and some of our work and helped to develop some observational assessment tools. One of the key things that we needed to tackle was having a really easy way to build a competency framework, so you could drag and drop competencies and build out hierarchy of competencies. And then to develop measures that would be associated with those, whether the person's on their first day of the job or their 39th day of the job. One of the things that's really important is tracking performance over time. And we may use different measures to do that, but they ultimately do roll up to the same competencies. So we built a system that allows drag and drop competency framework development and definition of measures, whether they're red, yellow, green, yes, no, or Likert scale. And then those assessments can be pushed out to mobile devices. So Bill can go to ride along with Susie, our salesperson, and her whole team, make those observations, and we're creating XAPI data, and we're also consuming it so that we can get a robust profile and an understanding about who are those rock stars, and in one case, integrating this with the sales system so we can actually see what types of experiences do people have, how are they being observed, and how is that actually impacting their sales, and then to be able to look at performance over time for that.
Outstanding, outstanding. One of the things I want to talk about is how do you do this? How do you figure out exactly where to start? You have all these choices, this big honeycomb to choose from. You've got the real business problems facing you, and the user experience you're trying to build, is how do you determine what the problem is and the solution. And Mike, you and your team have come up with the ecosystem canvas, something that we've all enjoyed using most recently. We are running short on time, but I definitely would love an opportunity for you to focus a little bit of time on this before our time expires.
Yeah, that's great. And I know in the follow-up materials, there's a blog post that's going up on Allen Interactions site that really talks about this a lot more. But the idea is that this learning ecosystem is extremely complex, and we need to be able to approach it in a methodical way to understand all of the important components of it. So we took a tool from design thinking called the Business Model Canvas, and we altered that tool to help you understand the components of your learning ecosystem and capture them and be able to validate those with your team. This is something that's out there in Creative Commons, and we encourage people to use it. In fact, if you do use it, I'd love to get some feedback from you about your experience. It has a number of different elements that are part of your learning ecosystem and your design, and then a number of elicitation questions that you can use with your team to start to understand what value you're trying to create, how you're going to measure that, and a lot of the other important components. This is one of many things that we use to understand the complexity and reduce it to something that's simple and thoughtful for a pilot, but it's a fantastic tool, and we really wanted to share it with the community so that people could start running towards our learning ecosystem instead of running away from what they're doing now.
That was impressively done in such a short period of time. But as he mentioned, Michael Allen, his team, Christopher Allen, and Mike wrote a white paper. It's going to be put up in the blog section at Allen Interactions, and we're also going to make that available at the end of this. You guys have asked a lot of questions along the way, and I wish we had another hour to focus on this. And trust me, the three of us have spent many hours talking about all this. Let's say a couple things. If you stay online, I will get back to all the questions that are asked. I didn't have a chance to answer all of them, but we will do that. You can get a hold of the three of us via our websites, and we will respond also with a number of things, the breakdown of the ecosystem and a legend, the breakdown of the eco canvas, and things that we think will be very useful for you as you try to explore these things. Mike and Michael, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Continued pleasure. The three companies have been working together on a number of different initiatives and having a great time doing it. The combination of different skill sets really being something we're having a chance to play with for the first time and take advantage of the ecosystem. So, Andrew, I'll hand it back to you to close and give instructions to the audience.
All right, great. Thank you, Bill and Dr. Allen and Mike Ruska for working with us today. Hopefully all of this made sense and you guys didn't miss anything. Just in case you did, you can call or email us. The information is there on the screen. Also, we'll include some links in the email that's going to follow up this. Bill had mentioned we're going to send you an email within the next few hours. It'll include a copy of this webinar. It'll include links to eLearningBrothers.com, AllenInteractions.com, ProblemSolutions.net. It's also going to include links to blogs and the white paper Bill mentioned. So do be looking for that webinar or email that will include the webinar. Also be knowing that do know that we will try to reach out to you and get questions answered. Or if you want to reach out to us, we're happy to continue this conversation, just like Bill said. Thank you again, Bill, Mike, and Dr. Allen. We appreciate you. And thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.